In the mid-4th century, despite a brief national renewal under Emperor Constantine the Great, the Roman Empire began breaking down. Although Constantine's sons won battles over the Goths, the Sarmatians, and the Alemanni along Rome's northern border, they and their cousins were greedy and arrogant. The empire had become decadent by bringing in foreign labor, expanding noble estates, driving down wages, and driving up the cost of land in Italy for native Romans. The empire's social unity was shattered by giving Roman citizenship to more and more people from outside nations. So the sons of Constantine and their cousins, living in an age wherein loyalty to the Roman state and the traditions of their fathers meant less and less, they fought each other over the empire using foreign mercenaries from Germanic lands. Over the following century, the empire slowly broke apart. Out of this weakening Roman state, barbarian hordes came pouring over the borders seeking status as federati, semi-independent tribal states within the empire. Much like France, Britain, Germany, America, and Canada today, the Roman Empire was choosing the quick economic growth of diversity over the long-term good of its own people, for the sake of having cheaper soldiers in its armies and cheaper labor on its farms. But not all of these barbarian tribes settled within the empire. Some tribes raided and then retreated, and chose instead to use Rome's weakened borders by building a kingdom along its borders, and offering Rome peace, in exchange for money, of course. One such kingdom was Gepidia, the kingdom of the Gepids. Croeso, welcome. I'm Benjamin, and I noticed on YouTube here that there's not really many videos about the Gepids, and this is a fascinating kingdom, a Germanic kingdom, which really shaped the lower Danube, middle Danube for over a century and left a lasting impact upon the geopolitics, languages, and cultures of the area. So I'm making a video about this, and if you like this, tap the like button, and if you really like it, leave me a donation so I know to make more of this kind of content. Now let's get into the video. The Germanic tribes of Scandinavia and their beginnings are shrouded in fog, being so far from civilized antiquity. As I mentioned in my video on the Gothic migrations, an historian named Jordanes wrote Getica, a history of the Goths, in the 6th century, when the Gepid Kingdom was falling. Jordanes mentions in this work the Gepids, or the Gepids, with a semi-mythical story about where they came from and their kinship with the Goths. He mentions the Getae here, which I must note was a mistake. He confused the Germanic Goths with the Dacian or Thracian-related Getae people along the lower Danube. After telling of where the Goths came from, moving from mainland Sweden to what is probably the island of Gotland, Jordanes writes, "Should you ask how the Getae, that's the Goths, and the Gepidae are kinsmen, I can tell you in a few words. You sure remember that in the beginning I said the Goths went forth from the bosom of the island of Skansa with Berig, their king, sailing in only 3 ships toward the hither shore of the ocean, namely Gothiskansa. That's where Poland is today. One of these 3 ships proved to be slower than the others, and thus it is said to have given the tribe their name, for in their language Gepanta means slow. Hence it came to pass that gradually and by corruption the name Gepidae was coined for them, by way of reproach, for undoubtedly they too trace their origins from the stock of the Goths. But because, as I have said, Gepanta means something slow and stolid, the word Gepida arose as a gratuitous name, so wrote Jordanes in Getica. How true this is we can only guess, but what it does shed light on is that the Goths and the Gepids come from the same roots, and the Gepids broke off this larger nation and for a time settled in Denmark. However, sometime in the 3rd century, under a leader named Festida, they came to settle around the river Vistula in Poland. King Festida defeated the Burgundians and took their lands to the south, which is said pinned him in between mountains to the south and dense forests. So he approached his kin, Ostrogotha, king of the Goths, and demanded that he give the Gepids lands, going east toward the river Bug. This was rude, to demand their own kinsmen give up some of their lands. This would have taken well-paying trade routes to the Black Sea away from the Goths, and so Ostrogotha reluctantly chose war with the Gepids, his own blood. Festida and the Gepids were defeated, and they went back to the Vistula, where they hunkered down on a fortified island. Some of the Gepids, however, seem to have joined the Goths. In the time period, enemies and friends were very fluid. Sometime between the year 250 and the year 400, the Gepids moved south. This likely began after their defeat, but was not all at once. According to the author of Historia Augustae, which may have been written by a man named Flavius Vopiscus, sometime before the middle 5th century, the Gepids were among the tribesmen which Emperor Phobos tried to settle within the empire to rebuild his economy as he fought Asian enemies. Several of these tribes, the Vandals, the Greuthungi, the Gepids, broke their agreement and rose up in war against Rome. The Goths invaded across the Danube as well. Whole regions of what was called Moesia, present-day Serbia through Bulgaria and up to the Romanian coast, were left in ruins during the crisis of the 3rd century and afterward. The fable and moral of the story: do not bring whole nations into your country and settle them within your lands, expecting them to become just like you. As for the Gepids, many were absorbed into a group of Goths, becoming the Visigoths along the Danube, and allowed to settle further south toward Greece. Other Gepids moved north through what would be the Banat of Romania today, and up along the Danube into the rich Pannonian plain. By the early years of the 5th century, the remaining Gepids in today's Poland along the Vistula either moved south into the Pannonian plain of Hungary to join their kinfolk, or been absorbed into Goths and Slavic groups. And these migrations were not without reason. The Huns, a fierce warrior people, burst out of the Eurasian steppe around the year 375, wiping out or wiping the floor with everyone in their path, forcing them into Hunnic armies if they surrendered. They defeated the Alans, the Eastern Goths, the Western Goths, Armenia, which was a strong kingdom at the time, and launched brutal raids on the Sasanian Empire and then the Eastern Roman Empire. So it makes sense that the Gepids did not want to hang around. I mean, what would you do? Would you cross the mountains, or would you just be run over by horsemen who raped women? Your choice. The Pannonian Plain, which would later be the cradle of the mighty kingdom of Hungary, is a defendable spot to keep control of. It yields loads of good food, and if you hold all of it, from Transylvania to the Alps, no one can attack you without having to cross either jagged mountains, sometimes several chains of jagged mountains, or the river Danube, which is the widest river west of Russia. Jordanes tells us that the Gepids settled between Romania's Apuseni Mountains and the Tisa River of Hungary. However, you do not just walk into the Pannonian Plain and say you are in charge of the most fertile farmland between France and the Black Sea. You have to fight for it. The Huns conquered this low basin, making it their base in the 5th century. Rather than being wiped out, the Gepids wisely agreed to get out of the way, moving west along the Danube as the Huns built a warlord empire. The Hunnic Empire was more of a loose confederation of tar-heeled allies, tribes who were smart enough to see that if they fought under the Huns, for now at least, they would survive. Joining the Huns was a geopolitical game. that the second known Gepid king came to power in the 450s, King Artgrid. King Artgrid would have been well aware of his political state of affairs. The Huns had likely threatened those before him with being slaughtered if they did not join the Hunnic confederation, which now made the Pannonian Plain its base. It is said that King Artgrid became one of Attila's favorite vassals, so he played his cards well to save his people, or at least to save his crown. The Gepids could have easily sided with the Romans at this point, but Roman power was crumbling, and the empire posed no threat to the Gepids' long-term plan of ruling the Pannonian Plain. The Huns, meanwhile, were ruled by Attila, a bloodthirsty warlord who had won every battle he had ever fought so far, including the Battle of Utis in 447. At this battle, Attila defeated 3 Roman armies at once, killing over 70,000 men, with the most technologically advanced armor in the world, and killing the most senior military commander in the whole Eastern Roman Empire. Attila was not someone you messed with. The Eastern Roman Empire would not recover from this battle for over 50 years. And I tell you this to show you that siding with the Huns against Rome was the wiser move for King Artgrid to make for his kingdom, since Attila could have conquered Rome. He almost did at one point, so siding against him would have been stupid. However, the Eastern Roman Empire, as it slowly took on a form over the next few decades we can call the Byzantine Empire, would not forget that this upstart, little Germanic kingdom sided with the Huns over the empire when it was weak. The Huns took the strategically placed city of Sirmium, present-day Serbia. You will see that this is relevant later. For now, Attila was not done. He had tried to take the great city of Constantinople, but could not breach its walls. Attila then looked toward the Western Roman Empire for a powerful wife. He had dynastic ambitions. The Western Roman Emperor, Valentinian III, had a sister, Justa Grata Honoria, who was betrothed to a Roman aristocrat senator named Bassus Herculanus. Now get this, this aristocrat senator Bassus had killed her illegitimate bastard son. We don't know what happened with her, but my opinion is that when women want revenge, they will destroy their own country to get it. And if Senator Bassus had killed her son in order to secure her marriage politically and then kept her at his Italian estate, is that not dangerous to do to a woman if she's in a powerful position enough to bring in enemies in an attempt to destroy your empire? Well, she sent messengers to Attila with her golden ring as a gift, offering him lands and reward if he helped her. Attila took this as what it may have been, an offer of marriage if he would invade the Western Empire and free her. Attila accepted the offer and demanded half of the Western Empire in return. Naturally, Emperor Valentinian III looked at this offer, laughed, and refused. So Attila the Hun invaded. So how did the Gepids come into this? They joined Attila and invaded the Western Empire as part of his army. King Artgrid was one of the leaders in Attila's army, leading his Gepids in the era-defining Battle of the Catalaunian Plains in 451. In what is today the northern French region of Champagne, King Artgrid led the right wing of Attila's armies in the battle. What makes this battle so crucial to understanding the Gepids is that Germanic tribes fought against each other, both being conscripts and mercenaries in the armies of Rome and the Huns. The Gepids fought against Visigoths, and Visigoths fought against Goths. Franks fought against Saxons, whilst also fighting a civil war with other Franks. The Burgundians, which the Gepids had stolen lands from a couple centuries earlier, fought together with the Gepids as friends, and Burgundians, within the empire, fought against Burgundians from beyond the empire. The Visigoths, however, invested a lot in the battle, and they threw their weight behind Rome and against the Gepids. It wasn't personal. Everybody just fought everybody and changed sides according to what would gain them a better position. The Gepids were very much of their age. As many as 300,000 men died on both sides. This was a cataclysmic battle, but it did last a few days around the area, and whilst many say this was a Roman victory, it was not a clear victory for anyone, an uneven draw, meaning that Attila had not quite lost. But his face, his prestige, was wounded forever. If Attila attacked again, his army would be broken, so he pulled back just before he lost. Cut your losses, right? King Artgrid could have made a move at this point to build a Gepid Kingdom, but he appears to have been a clever king and waited for Attila, who was a heavy drinker and partier, to destroy himself. A year and a half later, in 453, Attila held a feast where he drank himself to death. King Artgrid's chance had finally come. After his death, Attila's three main sons sought to divide his empire, and King Artgrid, who had likely planned his revolt for over a decade, rose up against the Huns. In his book Getica, Jordanes writes, "For the sons of Attila, who through the license of his lust formed almost a people of themselves, were clamoring that the nations should be divided amongst them equally, and that warlike kings with their peoples should be apportioned to them by lot like a family estate. When Artgrid, king of the Gepidi, learned, he became enraged because so many nations were being treated like slaves of the basest condition, and was the first to rise against the sons of Attila. Good fortune attended him, and he effaced the disgrace of the servitude that rested upon him. For his revolt he freed not only his tribe, but all the others who were equally oppressed. They took up arms against the destruction that menaced all and joined battle with the Huns in Pannonia, near a river called Nadau. This was the Battle of Nadau in 454. Elek, the eldest son of Attila, fell in battle, and with him nearly 30,000 men. The Huns were wrecked. Hunnic power would never recover, and the Gepids gained a kingdom along the northern flank of the Danube and up the eastern side of the Tisa River. The Huns fell back to the Sea of Azov above the Black Sea. But for King Artgrid and the Gepids, they now had a bigger problem than before. Gaining an independent kingdom is one thing, keeping it is quite another. Do you remember that city I mentioned, the city of Sirmium, here? It's very important, connecting Constantinople to the north of Italy. Both were major strategic points around the empire. And so the Ostrogoths, the Gepids, and the Byzantines fought over this. Speaking of the Byzantines, Emperor Leo switched the language of the empire from Latin to Greek. It was a statement, but also reflecting the cultural reality. The power had shifted east. The west was crumbling. The Ostrogoths overran it, and the Gepids, in this new, strange world, formed an alliance with the Byzantines, basically the Roman Empire, and went to war against the Ostrogoths. A lot of back and forth went fighting over the city of Sirmium, and the Ostrogoths, just to show you they were a big, considerable nation. They defeated the Gepid Imperial Alliance in the Battle of Bolia in 468. Setback. However, The Ostrogoths were not content with ruling Pannonia. They wanted an even bigger kingdom, and so the Gepids were lucky. The Ostrogoths went to Italy. See my video on their kingdom, I'll put a link below. They left Sirmium undefended, and so the Gepids took the city, the key defensive stronghold along the northern road between Constantinople and Italy. This pushed the Gepids into a dangerous game. The new emperor Zeno was at war with the Ostrogoths, and the Adriatic coast held by the Ostrogoths in present-day Croatia was ravaged. The Gepids lost Sirmium, took it back, and lost it again. This suggests the Gepid Kingdom was weakening in the decades after Artgrid's death. If you were to define European geopolitics entering into the 6th century in one word, the word fluid might be how you would define it. Loyalties changed, tribes merged and broke apart, kings rose fast and fell faster. Germanic mercenaries were often paid to fight their own people. So during all this, the series of Gepid kings who ruled after Artgrid is uncertain, to say the least. We merely have names: Giesmus, Thrapsila, Thrasric. It is believed that King Thrapsila died in battle against the Ostrogoths, which, as happens in many weakened kingdoms, caused a political crisis. Thrapsila's son, Thrasric, came to the throne, but his bloodline was disputed by Mundo, the grandson of Artgrid. In a world of warriors, faith, and tribes, your bloodline matters a great deal. It's not a joke like today. Mundo survived, however, and fled south, becoming a bandit and possibly building a small kingdom of his own. Naturally, the empire could not have this rebel upstart upsetting the imperial order along the border. Emperor Anastius I sent an army to crush Mundo's outlaw kingship. Mundo, however, formed an alliance with Theodoric the Great, who was busy building a kingdom in Italy, and rightly saw the Byzantine Empire as his chief rival. Theodoric sent Mundo an army, and together they defeated the imperial forces. This was quite a victory. During this period in the early 500s, the Gepid Kingdom forced the Byzantines to pay them tribute in order to keep the peace, but now the Gepids were in debt to the Ostrogoths. As happens so often in history, winning a battle with the help of a larger kingdom leaves you in their debt. Theodoric the Great felt that Western Pannonia was now the property of the Ostrogoths, and he took the city of Sirmium as his reward. Mundo later died fighting the Goths whilst being paid by the empire. Out of this chaos, a more stable king arose, who was more able to use the Ostrogothic kingdom in Italy and the Byzantine Empire against each other, partly due to political skill and partly just because the timing was right. I must note that during this time, the Lombards came down from the north and destroyed the Heruli kingdom along the middle Danube, forcing this smaller tribe into the North Pannonian plain, and the Heruli appear to have formed an alliance with the Gepids, fighting with them against the Ostrogoths in order to stave off being killed by the Lombards. A Gepid king named Elumund had held out in Transylvania during the chaos of the 520s, when Theodoric the Great of the Ostrogothic kingdom died, plunging most of the northeastern Balkans into social disorder and economic ruin. Emperor Justinian the Great, who I mentioned earlier, came to the throne in 527 and at once began planning a Mediterranean-wide restoration of the empire through conquest. Emperor Justinian stopped paying the Gepids tribute. But for the Gepids, this was actually an opportunity. He was preparing Byzantium for the reconquest of Italy, held by the Ostrogoths, the Gepids' main rivals in the region. And so it was a blessing. So long as King Elumund did not provoke Justinian's anger, he could keep the Gepid kingdom stable and centralize power. King Element wisely married his daughter, Ostragusa, to King Wacko. Maybe it's Wacho because it's Germanic. Anyway, King Wacho of the Lombards, to guard his western flank against the Ostrogoths. The Lombards were likely settled in Pannonia by Emperor Justinian, to make sure the Gepids did not grow too powerful whilst he was fighting his war in Italy. And sadly, when King Element died in 548, Emperor Justinian's plan to weaken the Gepids through bringing in the Lombards paid off. The Lombards and the Gepids were now rivals, but neither were strong enough to wipe out the other. Upon King Element's death, his son Ostrogothus fled to the Lombards when a nobleman named Thoresen staged a coup d'etat and crowned himself king of the Gepids. This meant that the Lombards now had an heir to the Gepid throne in their court, whilst being supplied by the empire. Not good for the Gepid Kingdom, was it? King Thoresen's Gepid Kingdom was smaller, with the Pannonian Plain roughly split into four. The Byzantine Empire held the south, along the Danube, but the Gepids held Sirmium and the lands along the river Tisa, as well as the Apuseni Mountains and most of Transylvania. In the west, the Heruli had formed a kingdom by dominating other tribes, but one of these tribes under Heruli rule, as I mentioned earlier, the Lombards, they actually had revolted against the Heruli and killed the last Heruli king in battle by 508, destroying their kingdom. The surviving Heruli were scattered, with a large group moving off into Italy and another group moving northeast to the edges of the Pannonian Plain, in the north, with pockets as well by the Danube. The Lombards now controlled the western parts of the Pannonian Plain. This meant sooner or later the Gepids and the Lombards would have to fight for the Pannonian Plain. King Thoresen was faced with a Byzantium at war with the Ostrogoths, but the empire wanted the city of Sirmium back. Justinian did try, but King Thoresen repulsed him and kept the city. Thoresen also faced the Lombards, who held the heir to his throne, Ostrogothus, as a political weapon against him. So like most Dark Age warlords, Thoresen chose to find a tribe who was the enemy of his enemy. The Heruli and the Gepids formed an alliance and attacked the Lombards. King Thoresen made headway, and it looked like he would defeat the Lombards, but the Byzantines could not let that happen. It would disrupt the balance of power along the imperial border. Instead of attacking the Gepids head-on, the Byzantines fought a battle against the Heruli and destroyed their army. King Thoresen got the message. He made peace with the Lombards for now, to avoid a war with the empire. A writer named Procopius says that during the chaos a Lombard rebel king named Ildigas changed sides and fled to the Gepids. This put the Lombards and the Gepids in a strange situation. King Thoresen now had a pawn to use against the Lombards, who held Ostrogothus as a pawn against him. So both sides now had political hostages to use against each other in diplomatic maneuvers with the empire. The Gepids and Lombards traded insults with each other until both sides agreed to meet fully armed for war. I just get this image in my head of two Germanic tribes separated by a river yelling about each other's mothers across a river at each other. But the two armies, instead of fighting each other, retreated. This was a Cold War, Dark Age style, between two kingdoms who were roughly equal in strength. Both knew that the other could defeat the other, but the Lombards had one advantage over the Gepids. The empire's war with the Ostrogoths in Italy lasted 20 years, and since the Lombards held land just to the northeast of Italy, this was a key position for Justinian, who wanted to use it against both the Ostrogoths and anyone directly north of his borders who was getting too strong for him. So King Thoresen was faced with a Lombard-Byzantine alliance, which he had no real chance of defeating in open battle. So King Thorson did something clever, something that in the first quarter of our century, in the 21st century, has been done by Erdogan of Turkey, Putin's Russia, several North African states, and that is allow barbarians to pass through their borders as refugees. King Thorson set up a ferry service along the river Danube and then went to the north of the Black Sea, the Huns and other nomadic Asian peoples who wanted to make raids into the empire, to pillage it, to rape their women and steal their goods and burn their towns. He ferried them across the river Danube for a price. But Emperor Justinian couldn't really turn his finger and say, "You, Gepids, did this," because he had to confront whole armies of barbarian tribes, these hordes who had settled within his empire. So King Thorson was like, well, if you're going to mess with us, we'll flood your empire with refugees and immigrants. Justinian got the point. Focus on your war in Italy and leave the Gepids alone. In 551 or 552, the Lombard king Audoin invaded and defeated Thorson in the Battle of Asfeld. Audoin's son Alboin killed Thorson's son Turismod, the heir to the throne. Try saying that 3 times fast. This was a heavy blow to the Gepid Kingdom. Not only this, but the Lombards renewed their alliance with the empire, and Justinian won the war against the Ostrogoths. The Gepids were isolated. On top of this, they clung to Arian Christianity, a Christian sect at odds with the church in Rome. Members of the Lombardic aristocracy, not all of them, but some of them, shifted to Roman Christianity, which made them spiritual allies in some families to the Byzantine Empire against the Gepids. But I need to note, the Lombards and the Goths both shifted between Roman, Eastern, and Arian Christianity, depending how they stood to gain in power games by doing so. The Gepids never left their Arian Christian beliefs, and were willing to die to defend them to the very last. So to understand their Arian Christianity and how it shaped them as a people, I will show you briefly what this was. When Christianity became a state religion of Rome under Constantine in the early mid-4th century, the religion did not yet have a firm shape, nor any common consent among all groups as to the nature and link between Jesus and God. In the decades before Constantine made Christianity the state religion, a Berber, that is a native North African, named Arius, built a following around him in Alexandria in Egypt. As seen here, with Arius under the feet of Emperor Constantine, the Roman authorities saw Arianism as a threat to its hegemony. Why was it a threat to them, you might ask? Well, on top of denying the Holy Trinity, meaning they believed God to be above Jesus, not of him, they took away infant baptism, because like Jews, they did not believe in original sin. That is to say, they refused belief that we are born into this world guilty of anything, meaning we as humans are at heart good and not cast away by our Creator for the sins of those who came before us. And without writing a whole essay to explain it, they did not view hell in the same way either. This means, as is true of Jews also, the empire could not use original sin nor the idea of hell to control Arian Christians through the Roman state, with, let's be honest, making them have a guilt trip over nonsense. It just happened the Goths came down into Bulgaria at the exact moment that Arian Christians had a breather from persecution in the 330s. This is when a Gothic preacher named, and I like his name, Woofilos, began spreading it among the Germanic tribes of the Danube River Valley. My own opinion is that Germanic peoples deeply value fairness under law in relations between individuals, and Arianism's lack of original sin would clearly be a better fit for the Germanic Gepids than the collective ideas of Catholicism. It's no coincidence to my mind that the Protestant Reformation broke out in Germanic lands, nor is it a coincidence that Jews and Germanic peoples built friendships and business. Both the Germanic and Jewish cultures see morality as rooted in the worth of the individual under law. It is crazy how rare that is around the world. Wolfilas created a Gothic script. Whether the Gepids used this script for writing is up for debate. If they did not speak the Gothic language itself, they spoke something very close to it. They would have no doubt taken local words from Romanized peoples, Slavic tribes, and the pre-Roman Dacian language. See my video on the Dacian language. Because the Arian faith was hated by the authorities, the writings of Arian Christians were burned. Hardly anything has survived. If Gepids were writing in their own language, what they wrote down was likely burned. Now back to King Thorson. Procopius describes some of the diplomatic skill Thorson had, for even with losing a battle against the Lombards, losing his own son, and losing the diplomatic war in Italy, as well as the spiritual war within Christianity, King Thorson handled his troubles very well. Procopius says that Emperor Justinian and King Alduin of the Lombards sent a message to King Thorson to release Ildigisal, the rebel Lombard who I mentioned earlier. Rather than giving in, King Thorson spoke with his nobles in council and sought their advice on this matter. His noblemen said it would be better for the Gepids to perish as a people in battle than to pollute their honor by obeying two foreign rulers at once. Thorson and his nobles came up with a cunning plan, which would help build a peace with the Lombards and strengthen both of them against the empire. He convinced the Lombards to kill Ustragotha, the Gepid heir, who had taken refuge with them, and he agreed to kill Ildigisal in exchange. This way, they both killed their own political tools against the other, removing the ability of the Byzantine Empire to exploit them against each other. Emperor Justinian was not happy about this, because it meant the Gepids and the Lombards agreed to peace for the rest of King Thorson's rule, and the Gepid Kingdom grew its strength along the imperial border. The Byzantine Empire, having fought a war for 20 years in Italy to defeat the Ostrogoths, was too tired to get involved. The late 550s saw peace and prosperity reign across the Gepid Kingdom of King Thorson. But good times never last, my friends. After King Thorson, a man named Cunimund came to be king of the Gepids in the year 560. He was probably King Thorson's own son, which shows the kingdom had grown more stable from earlier in the century, with its multiple coups d'etats. However, Cunimund's own brother Turismod had been killed by the Lombard prince Alboin. That same year Alboin became king of the Lombards. Meanwhile in Constantinople, Justinian the Great was growing old. He had conquered Italy, parts of North Africa, the Adriatic Sea, and the southwest of Spain whilst holding the Asiatic empires back. But he had neglected one place, the northern coast of the Black Sea, which allowed the Avars to move out of the Eurasian steppe. In 559, a year before Cunimund became king of the Gepids, the Avars sent a message to Emperor Justinian offering to fight barbarians of the steppe in exchange for gold. Emperor Justinian had just spent over 30 years fighting the Germanic kingdoms of the fallen West to expand the borders of his Byzantine Empire to restore the glory of Rome. He did not have time for such nonsense. Far to the north, with a group of Turkic or Mongolic barbarian upstarts from lands beyond the known world. So he made a mistake that those after him would have to deal with. He gave these barbarians gold to defeat what remained of the Huns and to stop Eurasian horsemen from raiding his borders. You know, Niccolo Machiavelli said in his work The Prince, "Do not hire people to fight your battles for you, just because it's expedient." And that's what happened. Meanwhile, King Cunuman's Gepid Kingdom was now in a pile of elephant-sized poop. The Lombards to his west were receiving aid from the empire to build up their military. The Avars to his east were being paid gold to kill his allies and move their borders west toward his kingdom, whilst the empire built a string of forts using highly advanced military engineering technology along his southern border. To his north and near east, the Slavic tribes overran the western Carpathians of today's Slovakia and plains of Wallachia in today's Romania. Let me ask you a question. What would you do in this situation? You have 5 options. Would you gamble on the fact that Justinian was old and attack the empire head-on, maybe triggering a war on 3 sides? Would you hit the Avars to defend your allies far to the east and risk spreading your army too far by crossing 2 mountain ranges? Would you avenge your brother by revoking your peace treaty with the Lombards, who are about the same strength as you, with no geographic barrier between you, meaning if you lose your kingdom falls, but if you win, you could become a great kingdom? Would you attack the smaller Slavs, who had not attacked you, to show the other 3 you were strong, whilst you buy yourself more time? Or would you do nothing, which was probably the worst thing that you could do? My choice would have been to attack the Slavs, to recruit defeated tribes into my army, and wait for the Avars to attack the empire before I attacked the Lombards. But then again, the Lombards did not kill my brother, did they? It looks like King Cunuman chose the 5th and worst option. He didn't do anything. His nobles did not remove him, which is a miracle, but the Lombards under their new, younger King Alboin took advantage of this and formed an alliance with the Avars in 563, with the aim of dividing his kingdom between them. Despite all this, King Cunuman still had one ace up his sleeve to play. When the Lombards under Alboin invaded, King Cunuman sent messengers to Constantinople, offering Emperor Justinian II the city of Sirmium, which not even Justinian the Great was able to take. The empire agreed, and joined the war on the side of the Gepids. Now King Cunuman was winning the war. The Lombards were almost defeated, and the Byzantines wanted their side of the agreement paid. King Cunuman must have been a diplomatic idiot. He lied to the Byzantines and did not give them the city of Sirmium, so the Byzantines withdrew their support, allowing the Avars to invade from the east. The Avars seem to have gotten lost in the mountains and never showed up, which was a bit of luck for the Gepids. But still, the Gepids now having lost the empire's support, King Alboin of the Lombards renewed his invasion. He defeated Cunuman in battle the next year in 567, ending the Gepid Kingdom. However, King Alboin of the Lombards made a mistake. Do you remember what I said about how dangerous women are when they want revenge? King Alboin, to gain a male heir after his first wife's death, and to show royal legitimacy, took the Gepid king's daughter Rosamund as his wife. And he treated her badly. He formed a drinking cup out of her father's skull and invited her to drink merrily with her father. I mean, that's twisted and cruel, but it was the Dark Ages, I suppose. Rosamund waited for several years, plotting her revenge. King Alboin's Lombards, pushed out by the Avars, invaded Italy, or moved into Italy rather, to found a new kingdom. Not all of the Lombard aristocracy was happy with this move to Italy. It showed weakness, being forced from their lands by the Avars without putting up much of a fight. One such noble was Helmichis, and Rosamund, now Queen Rosamund, and daughter of the last Gepid king, whose whole male family had been killed by the deeds of her own husband, seduced Helmichis. She then won him over and convinced him to stage a coup d'etat against Alboin. She then seduced a third man named Perdio, who was to do the actual killing of the king. They succeeded in killing King Alboin. She had her revenge, but the coup d'etat still failed. It is a bittersweet end, and a tragic story that has been recycled and rewritten across the centuries, and is part of the glory of our Western civilization. Most of the surviving Gepids joined other Germanic tribes, or were absorbed into the Avars who came after them. The Avars destroyed the city of Sirmium in 582, as a statement to the empire that the geopolitical games were over. Thank you very much to my Patreons, on the screen now. Diolch yn fawr iawn am wylio.